All right, two guys with spare time coming online today. What are we today? 27th of May, which is called Big Hole Day for two organizations in the playoffs, I think. I don't know, I felt like maybe today's podcast could be done in 4 minutes because if we're simply talking about the conference finals, I think they're done in about 48 hours potentially.
Yeah, it's
Um,
a clean sweep of a pod here. Let's go.
that's it. I don't think anyone's probably feeling any vibe that these teams in the holes, the T-Wolves and obviously the Pacers, for different reasons in a sense, have any hope of being an historical team of somehow winning four in a row. I don't know, man. What do you think?
Um, Look, I think if you had to say which team has a better chance, if you're playing this game, I think we collectively would say Minnesota could
Could
do
could
better than Indiana.
could get
But the
one.
issue here is, I think the biggest talking point before we get deeper into the analysis of the teams, the biggest challenge now is not in the losing team coming back from 3-0 and being the first team ever. That's not the conversation that people should be having. The conversation now is how quickly can the teams finish the series to force the finals? Because when you look at, say, Boston, there is a motivation for them for Dallas to take longer because Porzingis would get more rest.
True.
If they sweep, that's fine. They're now resting, they're waiting. But if Dallas sweeps, that puts the pressure back on Boston. And I think that's probably a talking point that I'd address. But maybe let's break down the series a tiny bit. Let's start with the easy one. Let's go with Celtics and Indiana. What are we noticing after 3-0? I think one testament would be these series, both conferences have been quite close. There's been two games each that have ended relatively within the last couple of possessions. Indiana, obviously has the hindsight of should they call a timeout in game one and should they have called a timeout in game three. I think we all collectively understand that Boston is a better team. I was watching that game live. They really locked in defensively and kind of strangled that game back into their possession. And with Tyrese Halliburton being out, I think Indiana is a nice story, and that's about as far as it's going to go for them. They might get game four at home, but it'll be game five at Boston. I think Boston's poised to sweep. It's ultimately if they didn't shoot very well from three, but ironically, Indiana didn't take many threes in game three as well. So I think that actually allowed them to stay in it. It's Boston's series to lose. We said that the whole time, but it's also Boston's games to lose at this point. They can finish it. They can finish it tomorrow, but they might muck around and have to finish it in 3 days' time. What do you think?
I picked the Pacers. I'm going to be wrong. I think that's pretty clear. That said, obviously Kyrie's going down with this Devin Booker-like hamstring sort of situation is highly unfortunate for Indiana. And when you lose your best player, what can you say, right? That's a huge, huge blow. I think on top of that, dropping game one in the way that they did, and you said, should they have called a timeout? 100% they should have called a timeout. I think that's the given, right? I don't know anyone out there that's got basketball experience from a coaching perspective would suggest that they shouldn't have called a timeout in that situation. I think even at the point, and this is the NBA, right? So when they were struggling to inbound, they could still call a timeout at that point. Yeah,
Mm.
so there was so many different opportunities to call a timeout to advance the ball, to reset the possession, and instead of what sort of transpired, which was highly lucky, I guess, somewhat. But credit to Jaylen Brown to make that shot. Um, but look, at the end of the day, I think when you lose in that fashion, when you're already the underdog, it's psychologically damaging. That's I think
Yeah.
I can't you can't sort of quantify that sort of reality. And you're sort of like, well, look, we'll just come back and we'll just win the next one. But you already know, like, oh, we had this one against the team that was favored to beat us, and we let that one slip. Then our All-Star goes down with an injury. And, it's lights out. I think yeah, I think Pacers are happy to go on holidays right now and regroup next season and go again.
Well, one of the things of hindsight as well is that, okay, it's easy to analyze the Indiana blunder in game one and say they should have called a timeout or they should have deliberately fouled to avoid a turnover or to avoid the three. To be honest with you, that's just a different scenario that we don't know the full outcome of. All right, they foul. They foul, but they accidentally get up a three, so they get three free throws anyway, or they foul and then they miss the second one and get a scramble rebound and then hit the game winner and it never goes to overtime, or they foul and then they win the game.
Well,
There's all these hypotheticals that come out of games. I think we've done this to death. So
I think,
you
look,
know, Indiana made a couple of blunders, but I think as your coaching experience would say, and at least this is something I've always preached with coaching, don't let the referees or don't let one moment in a game decide it, right? You want to do all the things in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, etc., to put yourself in a position where you're not reliant on the last 5 seconds of a match or something needing to go your way or the right call to be made. You know, you be in control of what you're in control of. And, you know,
I think
Indiana had lots of opportunities.
I think you're right. The outcome, should you have changed some of the, or even a single variable in what did occur that night, there's 1,000 different outcomes that could have then gone a different result for either team in that sort of sense. But let's just look at the simple one of advancing the ball. Yeah, and this is something I talked to a few basketball heads around here, and as far as I'm concerned, that felt like a no-brainer. And I know you're trying to open up the floor and so on and so forth, but even if the same exact play transpired, they struggled to inbound it. They've advanced the ball. They've struggled to inbound it. They've made that pass. There was a deflection off Siakam, but obviously into now the back court. And now you got Jaylen Brown and Siakam sort of racing for that ball sort of situation. If Siakam picks up the ball, a stoppage of play, because I guess that's a cross court, right? But let's say Jaylen Brown gets his hands on the ball, okay? All right, because he was the one that's obviously disrupted that play there. Now you're talking about a real different scenario of hitting a clutch three with a lot of seconds to go in transition to tie it up, or taking a layup and you're still down by one. I think that's still a favourable outcome to the Pacers. And I think that's why this whole could should, I don't even think it's a could should. You should have. That's it. No brainer. Rick Carlisle said that at the press conference. I think he knows that.
Yeah, I guess maybe then outside of the ramifications of game one, let's say they win game one off those should haves, then Tyrese Halliburton still goes down. They lose 4-1. Like, I think it's a very foregone conclusion for Boston. Obviously, then it opens up more hypotheticals. You know, does the pressure get to them, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is,
here's the hypothetical. They win game one and Tyrese has a good night's sleep and then his hammy doesn't get pulled, right? I don't know. You know what I mean? Stuff like that happens, right? Butterfly effect.
there's a lot of butterfly effect. I think ultimately the fact that we're really engaging in the deepest of hypotheticals is indicative of how this series has played out, which
That's it.
is
Pacers are
Boston's
cooked.
probably going to sweep.
Pacers
Yeah.
are cooked. Next.
And then when we talk about another team that's cooked, surprisingly, Minnesota, this is my, I guess, Pacers pick in this conference. So Minnesota, Dallas has not panned out, I think, the way a lot of people expected. I think we all expected a little bit more of a competitive series, and it may end up that way. It might end in 6 games and Minnesota goes on a mini run here because they have proven the ability to win away. But it just seems like Luka has their number. Seems like Gafford and Lively, admittedly Lively went down today, so maybe that's something that benefits the Timberwolves in game 4, have really countered the big situation that Minnesota was relying on in the Denver series. But, you know, what would you take away from this? Is Luka cooking them, or is Karl Anthony Towns cooking Minnesota? And it's that conversation that needs to come back up again, because Ant Edwards has done his part as a 22-year-old superstar. He's had good games, but he has a little bit of up and down stuff. Rudy Gobert's playing his role, and when he gets switched onto Luka, I don't think anyone's going to expect him to be the favorable matchup there. But it's Cat. It's Cat shooting almost 20 shots a game to only get 10 or 20 points tops. He's wildly inefficient. He's getting into foul trouble. He's not doing a lot. Naz Reid is outplaying him, like plain and simple, on a fraction of the contract cost. And obviously, as we sunset Minnesota, either in the next game or the game after that, does the Cat conversation come real, where it's we've got to figure out how to fix it because Minnesota's got a legitimate shot?
We talk every week about we don't have a stats guy, but today I can legitimately be at least a one stat guy here. Karl Anthony Towns is shooting 27% in this series, which is the 4th worst in history. All right, for a conference final, and that is probably not a top 5 list you want to sort of make in that sort of sense, by any means. But I think you asked a question about Karl Anthony Towns or Luka, and you said, Luka seems to have that number. Name me a player that Luka, or team almost, that Luka doesn't have the number for on any given night, especially across the board in a series. And even when he has lost series, it's not on him. It's supporting cast. It's been just the reality that sometimes you lose games of basketball. I think that's the reality here, that he is by far the best player on the floor, even if he's not really 100%. And then with Kyrie and the sort of sidekick that he is, which is a perfect sort of, he's been there, he's done that, he's won a ring in this exact scenario next to LeBron, that he's playing his role perfectly. I think the T-Wolves are just young. I think the T-Wolves are maybe a little bit got there ahead of schedule, but they had a favorable sort of matchups in that sort of sense. And you're gonna say, well, Nuggets, how's that favorable? Well, they had three guys against one big, right? I think that's favorable to a certain extent. And at the end of the day, correct me if I'm wrong here, isn't it the team that just goes out and play generally sort of shows up? And the T-Wolves did a lot of talking, a lot of laughing. Suddenly they were like, oh my God, we're the favorites now. Yeah, and then now 3-0 down, suddenly that sort of all become a, I don't know, smoke.
No, I like that point because Denver kind of made that point when they finished their series against Minnesota. They basically said it's a different feeling when you are the hunted versus being the hunter.
Mm.
And, Denver obviously the level of effort. It's hard to question if people really feel that, but Minnesota conquered the champs, and there's got to be some euphoric state that comes over them where they think, and I mean, collectively, we all thought it. I definitely thought it. I was like, well, if they can beat the champs, really, they're going to beat
There's a
anyone.
fine line between confidence and overconfidence.
Yes, and they came out in game one, and it ends up being pretty close. Controversial, no basket call with the cat tip. Again, don't let refereeing decide too much with that. Luka hits an incredible shot. That's the only reason why they win game two. It's been close. It's been close, and today's the biggest margin of victory for either team. And you started to kind of see the wheels fall off where they just don't have it. Are we done with the series? Because I have a tangent to go for now.
I think, look, can Karl Anthony Towns make 30% of his shots? I don't know. Can they steal one on the road? No, nonetheless, right? They have to steal one on the road to extend the series to at least 5 games now. Look, I picked the Mavs. I'm going to clearly ride with the Mavs here. I don't think it really matters whether they get it done in 4, 5, 6. I can't see us like game 7 here. Someone's going to, Luka and Kyrie are going to put their foot down at some point and close this series out. I don't know if the T-Wolves have any real answers for that. I think that's the reality.
But I want to counter that because I do think this matters. I think for Dallas now, knowing that it's a foregone conclusion that they make the NBA Finals, they need to win it as quick as possible because not only do they want the rest, but they want to potentially put some pressure on Boston, right? They don't want to give Boston extra rest here because that Porzingis X factor, when we talk about the NBA Finals matchup later in the week, that's going to be the deciding factor. I'd happily take Dallas right now, right? And if Porzingis is healthy, then it makes it an interesting series. Otherwise, I actually like Dallas almost for like a gentleman's sweep. That's how confident I am in Dallas. So if they can't wrap up their series quickly and they let Boston rest for a week or 2 weeks, and Dallas just prolongs the whole thing, I think that's where it becomes pivotal. So that's now the urgency. It's not about seeing who can come back from 3-0 or get a bit more money for the NBA. It's actually they need to end this series now so that they're ready to go to put the pressure on Boston.
I'm not going to disagree that there's probably that extra point that finishing the series early would be a good thing. Yeah, look, I guess they just got to play the way they've played all sort of series long. Even I don't know. I'm gonna say here we got 2 sweeps, which is ironic because last week I was picking 2 long series and it just ain't panned out here. All right, less money for the owners. So sorry. Let's get on to the NBA Finals. Should we talk about this already? We know who's gonna be there.
No, no,
Surely,
no, no.
surely.
Well, let's let the last games play because we could be an ACL or Achilles or a random injury away from talking about the series and a different thing. And we're meeting a little bit earlier than we normally do for our regular viewers. So we'll be ready to go. I believe in a couple of days we'll be ready to talk about it. So.
All right. Well, I do have a question, Mr. Referee. Was that
Okay.
a violation for Cat? Is that my
Okay.
correction on that when it comes off the rim and it goes up, you cannot offensive goaltending is if it's still above the cylinder. Is that the rule? Is that the rule?
So we're going to now segment this as refereeing because I had a point I wanted to make about refereeing as well, but we'll talk about the basket interference, offensive basket interference. So first off, there are two versions of basket interference. There is the FIBA version and there is the NBA version. So the NBA version, the way that they called it, it's a stiff call because it was a 50-50, but it is a vertical cylinder. So imagine that the ring has a vertical cylinder going up, and if the ball is anywhere in that cylinder, it is interference, defensively or offensively. So if Cat's tip back, it's half in, half out. Obviously, it's coming out. That's just the natural trajectory of the ball. But when he touches it, when he slams it in, it ends up being sort of in the cylinder. They made that call. It's a harsh call. It's a harsh call because of the implications.
Do you believe it was correct?
For the NBA rule, yes, I do. But the issue is, go and watch the Olympics or go and watch any international FIBA play. Once the ball is not in the basket, the FIBA rules actually enable you to swat it away. So a defensive rebound could occur on that play where it was, or an offensive tip-in. This is the great conversation about the FIBA and NBA divide because, I've pitched these ideas. Why do we let this magical cylinder prevent these incredible athletes from doing things like that? What are the implications of that play if he catches the ball half a second later? It's 2 points. That's the thing. He caught it at the wrong moment. That's it. That's all that happened. If it's slightly out, if it slightly bends a little bit more, for me, it's just a weird rule. And what's the basket interference? The ball had hit the ring off a shot. It had clearly missed. It was going to miss. But because it falls in this magical line, imaginary,
it's not really magical. It's factual. But the question here really is that factually, was it in the cylinder?
And yes.
Was this reviewed? Was this play reviewed? Was this reviewed?
This was reviewed, and I don't know if that's too quick to segue into what I want to talk about, but the way that reviews work currently, and I think it needs an overhaul, reviews are analyzing the call on the floor. Okay, so this is a bit of a misconception here. It's the call on the floor. So they aren't going to look and say Cat actually got pushed and it's a foul before the offensive basket interfered, and they're going to change the call. They would ignore that. So Cat could get punched in the kidney as he tip jams this, and they're not reviewing the punch. They're not going to stumble across the punch on the review. They have to only look at that. And the reason why I bring this up is because in game 2, Jaden McDaniels is fouled by Kyrie Irving on the wrist, and it causes the ball to exit his hands, and he is the last one to touch it. And when they did the review, they analyzed the out-of-bounds call. They had to watch the replay, and the replay clearly hits him here. You can go and watch it yourself. He hits him on the wrist. It causes the ball to fall out of bounds. And Dallas was rewarded with the ball because the call that they were analyzing was the out of bounds, not what caused it to go out of bounds. The call only allows them to do that. So what I'm proposing here is when they review a play, they need to review a play as in the whole thing. And if they catch a foul, then so be it. Because you can't let a player lose control of the ball from a direct foul and then penalize them for it because they were, by the letter of the law, the last ones to touch it. And that was the point that I wanted to make because...
Ouch, this is I'm not liking this territory, man. I'll tell you straight up already. All right, so you're saying we review the play. At what point to determine a play begins?
So I understand what you're saying because then you could go all 20 seconds and you could catch an off-ball foul. You need to watch the replay sincerely. Within a second, Jaden McDaniels catches the ball on the baseline. He brings it down with two hands. Kyrie Irving comes in.
So just correct me on this play here. So it was off Jaden McDaniels, but you believe before that there was a foul on Kyrie, correct?
There is no, unfortunately for you, there is no belief. It is legitimately a foul.
There's a foul. All right, but there was no foul call, and it was off Jaden McDaniels.
Correct.
Then who challenged this? The T-Wolves challenged this.
I believe it's actually the referee review that they always do within the last 2 minutes for out-of-bound calls if they see it fit. I don't actually know if it was a challenge.
So then why did not Chris Finch just challenge that there was a foul call? Can he not challenge that?
Because that's not how it works. That's the issue with the challenge system. You're not challenging a no call. You're challenging the call on the floor. So let's say, for example, I go up for a dunk
I get you.
and I offensive foul you or something like that, but they don't even call a blocking foul. Then there is nothing to challenge. There is no play to review. Okay. So in that situation, and it's definitely very niche, but in that situation, like as I said, please watch the highlight, because it's 20 seconds of your time, but you'll understand what I'm talking about. Kyrie causes the ball to go out of bounds, but he causes it via a foul. And for them to turn the ball over, when in reality, there's no reason, that's not his fault that he turned the ball over. He gets fouled on the wrist. It's a push out of bounds. It's just that he's the last one to touch it. It's the limitations of the review system.
I'm almost going to go another direction here. I think we should remove or reduce the amount of reviews that we are permitted in a game. Look, I'm not a fan of necessarily getting it right every time, because that's not how the sport is played. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to be standing on the sideline screaming out when it's wrong too, and I'm going to lose my shit. I get it too. Yeah, we all do. But isn't that the point of sports? I think that's a part where I think people are missing with trying to get every single thing right. Hell, if we're gonna try and get everything right, you're saying now let's review 20 single play. Let's ensure we check every part of that play. If there is a foul, then let's add that. And maybe down the track, coaches could challenge no calls too. And now we're just trying to make sure every single thing is right from a rules perspective. And then you make the argument, well, rules are there, so rules are rules, right? But this is not, I don't believe, productive or positive for sports in that sense, especially for basketball. I don't know.
I understand.
And I know, and let's be clear here, here's a footnote, man. You're the guy that says fouls are wrong and fouls are bad. Fouls is an error of your ability in a game. I've always disagreed with that, correct?
What I've done, I've sent you the link, so I would really strongly suggest it. It is within the first 30 seconds. I understand your stance on this. I just need you to watch the play and understand that when they went to review this, they were only allowed to review who it last went out on. And factually, it goes out on Jaden McDaniels, but you can't ignore the reason why it goes out on him. And this is a very timely play.
But so what? It's a mess up. It's a bad call, but you get bad calls all the time, and you live with it, and it sucks, and it's something we can talk about. But
if you're going to go to the review system and you can't, because this is the limitations of the review system I'm talking about. I'm not talking about scrapping it. I'm not talking about keeping it. I'm talking about the limitations of the system, which is they went and watched this on a monitor. People in the review center, the referees on the court, they go and watch this. They put the headphones on, they go to the monitor, they watch this, and they have to completely disregard the fact that he gets hit on the wrist, and that is why it's out of bounds.
No, I hate this. I'm hating this more and more, man. Now you're getting me fired up like you did last week, because now you're basically saying, see, here's the catch, okay? The ref has missed his call, and I feel like now I'm jumping to defending refs and stuff like that. The ref has missed his call. There is a no call, therefore it can't be challenged, okay? But there are no calls throughout the whole course of the game. So now you might as well say the review center should be live time reviewing every single possession, and at a stoppage, maybe the guy that's upstairs can then drop his message into the earpiece and go, hey, or into the score bench, you guys missed this call, let's change this now. That doesn't work like that. That's not how sports works. It is what it is. It's controversial. Imagine this. Imagine every rule was correct in a game. Every single call was correct in a game of basketball. There would be no controversy. You would, and then therefore you would have very little conversation. There would be very little excitement. There would be very little opinion. You would sit there and go, "This is a perfectly played game of basketball. Clap, clap for that team that played it perfectly better. Let's go home." I don't see that.
Conversation would be around. You know what the conversation would be around? It would be around the fact that Minnesota didn't execute after that, because Minnesota's up by 2 and they turn the ball over with 40 seconds to go. And let's say they get the call correct, which is what we would ultimately hope for, and then Minnesota misses the shot. The conversation's not about the controversy or the missed call. It's about the fact that one team executed and one team didn't, which, in my opinion, in my utopia of basketball, that's what you want. You don't want to be talking about the referees messing something up or a suspension getting in the way or a technical getting in the way. You want to be able to talk about my team was better than your team or my team wasn't as good as your team. And you don't want these things coming up this conversation. And if you can sincerely watch that and say that so be it, if you can say so be it, then I don't
Well,
know if we should
well,
be potting
well,
anymore. I
well,
don't think we should be potting anymore
well, I
because I don't
did,
know
I
if I
did,
can.
I did tip the Mavs. Let's be clear, okay? So be it. It was off the T-Wolves, okay? And so be it. It looks like it probably is a foul. Yeah, I'll give you that, okay? And so be it that it sucks that it was, out on the T-Wolves, even though there was, a foul probably before that play. But so be it. That's how basketball has been played since its inception, pretty much. Correct. So why now are we trying to perfect the game of basketball? Is that what we're trying to do? Like, does this actually really improve the game of basketball? Like, I,
Well,
I don't know. I don't know. Like, I just
I understand. I understand your reservations on the review system. I guess the way that I'm viewing it is we have the system, they are using the system, and yet there is a clear limitation of the system, right? It's not going to make the game perfect because they get this call right, because they will miss other calls. I get it. But the fact that when you watch an NBA game, I don't know if you've done it, the full 2.5, 3 hour experience, it drags on. And these reviews are awful. Now, my logic would be if we're not going to be able to get rid of the reviews, can we at least get them right? Because that's blatantly wrong, right? And that's where the frustration comes from. I've got to sit there. It's a tense game. It's going back and forth for 6 minutes back and forth. Super entertaining. Wow, this is so good. And then I have to sit there, watch a timeout, watch a review system, watch the slow-mo replay. Let's get 15 different angles of the slap of the wrist. The ball goes out. And then we have to watch them basically pretend that there was no foul. And yep, Jaden McDaniels lost the ball. So therefore, it's Dallas ball. Like, that's a waste of time. That's when it becomes a waste of time. The fact that you have a review system and you can't even get it right because of the limitations around that rule. That's what I would change.
I'm not gonna buy it, man. Next thing you tell me that like on every basket they should just review that it wasn't a travel beforehand. Because guess what? That happens all the time, right?
That's
Players,
not the
play,
same. It's
players
not the same
shuffle
thing
shuffle
anymore.
their
It's not the
feet
same thing.
and so on and
It's not
so
the same
forth.
thing. But
It,
they do shuffle their feet.
yeah,
They
they
do
do.
shuffle.
So it's not right. The ref has missed the call. The ref
But they're
has
not
missed the
reviewing
call.
it.
But
Imagine if they reviewed it and then knew that they shuffled their feet and then still ignored it. That's what happened in this thing. I don't. I think we're on different wavelengths. I
I,
think this
I,
is
I
where it's
think I
frustrating
think
that
you're
we don't
clearly
have
on
more
the
data.
I think you're clearly on the T-Wolves bandwagon still. Time to jump off and jump on the Mavs one because you already said they're going all the way here.
We're going all the
They're
way.
going
Let's
all
go.
the way.
I'll get my call
Uh,
right
I
eventually. Jesus.
it's funny because I had a similar chat to another friend recently about this sort of area here, and I am. Look, you know what? I may not have realized I would have taken this stance 10 years ago, okay? But I'm a firm believer now with where NBA basketball is at and pro ball is with reviews and this stuff and all this stuff. I got asked at a game, at a junior game, can we review the play? Yeah, and I said, oh, I
Uh,
don't think so, okay? I don't think there's any
you're recording your games, are you?
review center here, okay? But I know it was a joke, alright? But it was like, that's the point, okay? I think I am still a traditionalist. I feel that that's the word here, that just play the damn game. And when there's something that's bad and wrong and there's clearly a missed call, you can scream and shout and be pissed off, but that's still part of the emotions of the game. And and I think that still
Right.
should
So
be
the
how it
so
should be
the
played.
two stances then, to make sure that we're in some form of common ground, the two stances are you don't even want to go to the monitor. You just want to let that bad call be a bad call and then move on.
Let the refs make the
And
call. That's what they're there
all right,
for.
that's fine. And I'm on the stand that, and this is where I feel like you're a bit of a dreamer now, and it's an odd role for you to be taking because normally that's my position. But I'm taking the position that reviews aren't going anywhere. They're going to keep it in
I'll agree
play.
with that.
So
I'll
why don't
agree
they
with
just get this bit right? Why don't they at least not force them? Because the limitation, you need to understand, if Kyrie Irving had punched him in like the head and they missed that call, in the review limitations, they can't do anything with that. They're only bound to the call that they made on the floor. That to me feels like, I know that you're saying, oh, well, when does a play end? Sincerely, between the two players, the defender and offender, which is always what we're reviewing, let's be honest, they have to get that bit right. They have to understand this is why this happened or this is why that didn't happen. They have to get at least that right. If they're going to continue to use that system, they have to be able to review the play at large and change calls as necessary.
What happened to Bull Don't Lie? Isn't that what we always used to do, right? When there was a bad call and shouldn't have been the call, you just go out there and then the next player goes the wrong way and then you go, Bull Don't Lie. Wasn't that the whole
That you got a text for
a
that.
whole
We don't want any text. We don't want text for that now. You don't want to get a text.
So look, I think I don't know, man. I'm not going to buy in that this is positive for the game in that sense. But you're right, review center is not going anywhere. I wouldn't be shocked horrid if they added what you're talking about in the next few years, in that sort of sense that now they will make that a reviewable play. I think they were talking about adding an extra coaches challenge too, I think, as part of maybe next season or something like that. So you're absolutely right. And guess what? Maybe someone lost out $1 million because Kyrie didn't get an extra foul because that's what they bet on. Right? Isn't that what's the important part here? Yeah, they bet that here was going to be,
Well, they're
plus,
gambling.
and he didn't get called that foul,
Michael Porter's brother is trying to make a living
Yeah,
somehow. He's not
yeah,
playing in the NBA anymore.
correct. Another Porter brother, like just less lost out there. So I don't know, man. Um, but yeah, look, man, it's definitely a dubious part of sports and basketball, and the world's continuing to go down that pathway. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. I'm just not necessarily a fan of that, but hey, look, I guess I'm just gonna come along with the ride, right? Because that's what we all do. Because we're fans here.
That's nice. I'm glad I brought you around to that. Is there anything else that's burning a hole in your pocket, or do you feel like this NBA season is coming to a very abrupt end
Yeah,
with
I
these?
got something that's burning a hole in my pocket. Probably burning a hole in Boston's pocket. You talked about it before, right? Was there some irony here that why didn't they just trade Kyrie for Porzingis? Yeah, this could be a real interesting. It's not necessarily a matchup, but just a
Oh yeah, I see what you
tale
mean. Yeah,
tale of two
yeah. Teams.
players,
Yep.
right? That we had Porzingis in Dallas, supposed to be Luka's sidekick, didn't play out. Injuries was probably a big part of not getting chemistry and continuation on the floor and so on and so forth. Missing playoffs. I spoke about before, like how many players, and you didn't necessarily answer me this because I don't think there is an answer to this, right? I don't think there's any player out there that has Luka's number. Yeah, if you're talking about, in that sort of matchup, I do not think there is a player out there that has Luka's number on any given night, specifically, especially over a 7 game series. Okay, but we've talked about in the past, yes, the Mavs have lost, and a lot of it has been because Porzingis was not there as his sidekick or 100%, and that was the role that he was brought into play. Then obviously he was moved on, and somehow he's obviously landed now with the Celtics when the Wizards didn't want him anymore, didn't need him anymore because they didn't rebuild, and somehow now Kyrie was a Celtic and did his whole full journey, and now he's at the Mavs, and we're now probably 99% sure they're going to be meeting in this 2024 NBA Finals. I don't know, man. It's a bit of an interesting full circle there, and I don't know. I think clearly the Mavs are the ones can't cop because the Celtics have inherited the exact concerns that the Mavs had about Kristaps Porzingis, and it's really unfortunate because they're the team that probably needs this one more, like we talked about last week.
Yeah, it is. It is funny how narratives obviously automatically come to play. As long as you keep deeping, but we don't have to dig too deep here. Kristaps is a team removed, so I think he went to the Wizards for a season and then ends up with the Celtics after the Dallas thing. Then Kyrie goes to Brooklyn and then ends up in Dallas. So there's been multiple spots. We've talked about this before. Teams, players are on their own journey. The fit at the time, the fit at that stage in their career, it's all those things. But yeah, look, Kyrie has a con. We talked about that when the trade was made. We're eating our words a little bit because I don't think anyone expected it to be this successful. And obviously, Kristaps was always a big asterisk in terms of injury stuff. Kyrie was always random, and can he be, reliable? Well, right now, it doesn't seem like that's going to falter. He's going to be there in the NBA Finals playing really well. And then it's Kristaps who, can he be reliable? And the answer is no. And they're both gambles. They're both gambles that helped position these teams to be in the NBA Finals. And unless Kristaps is ready to make a miraculous recovery and play all of the games in the finals, it just seems like Dallas took the risks. But then Dallas' season is going to be fascinating here. I think, not that we want to talk about finals projections yet, and I don't want to do the breakdown just now, but Dallas is definitely similar to, say, Toronto when they won the championship in 2019. They pick up their superstar. They only had half a season with Kyrie, if not less. And then they get the full season this season. But they also make the midseason trade for Gafford and Washington. And Toronto did the same thing when they picked up Marc Gasol. That was when we talk about the midseason trade deadline, it's never about getting the star player. It's about getting those role players. And Dallas just nailed those trades. And Yeah, I mean it's looking really good for the Luka GOAT conversation right now. I think it's sorry to Boston. I'm sorry, Boston. It's just you should have destroyed Indiana. I was ready to come on here after game 3 when they were down by 18 and just didn't seem to be chipping away at that lead. Saying you can't be losing any games to a team that just lost their best player. And yeah, they ground it out and they got it at the end. But Boston hasn't looked convincing against Indiana. They haven't been able to stop them defensively. Indiana's shooting 60+%. So yeah, I think it's the Luka bandwagon's about to explode, and it's already a pretty populated bandwagon.
I feel like you're writing off Boston, but
Oh yeah,
we can break that down. Next podcast.
oh yeah.
I just think, yeah, it is interesting about narratives here. It's probably actually really. Look, I've never been a Kyrie fan. I don't know about you, man. Okay, a lot of people are Kyrie fans. They grabbed his shoes when he was with Nike, and they were big sellers, obviously, that then. And then, and then when all that controversy sort of occurred in Brooklyn, he lost his sponsorship. They sort of had to discipline him somewhat. We were at a point where I was sort of like, oh, is this player just gonna, sort of be someone you sort of just write off in that sort of sense? But then he landed in the right spot, and he bought in. You could almost somewhat say he went back to Cleveland Kyrie, yeah, which is sort of exactly the role he needed to be. And now you're reading articles about him just being a great teammate, a great person, a great, just great, great all around, which is really positive to hear because let's be clear, this was not the narrative 12 months ago, yeah, 12, 18 months ago. So, and I think to capture another ring here would be a real redemption story for him to get one when he was a young one, and now he's sort of towards the tail end of his career now, inevitably.
Well, it opens up, is he the greatest number 2 in NBA history, and all these fun little
Oh
topics.
no, that's a terrible conversation.
No, like
That's a terrible conversation. It's not
no,
even
no,
in the
no,
top 10, surely.
no, no,
Surely
no.
Kyrie is
Number
not even
two.
a top 10
No, no,
number
no, no, no,
two.
no. You've misunderstood. Number 2, as in like the Robin, right? When we
I
talk about that,
understand exactly what you're talking about. What, just
no.
because he's got 2 rings potentially?
But the way that he did it, with 2 different superstars, you've got to admit an interesting career, a more interesting career now for him, where obviously the
No,
the
no.
LeBron championship was always going to be over his head and impact his legacy, but to get another one away from LeBron, probably
But
have a new age.
I feel like I really want you to talk about this topic. All right, you open the can of worms now. Okay, who is number 1 in the Robin top 2, man? Come on, like surely. I'm gonna throw it out. Scottie
Pippen,
Pippen. Scottie Pippen.
Pippen,
Surely,
right?
surely.
Pippen,
Okay, in
Pippen
just
we recognise as being the
okay,
best
and
second fiddle.
is there a footnote here that we clearly can't talk about players that we've never seen? Because we've spoken about this before, yeah. Because I guess if you go through the histories here and 80s,
I
70s
don't.
sort of thing, I'm sure there are a lot of sidekicks and there are a lot of rings
Maybe
won by Boston and the Lakers, for example. But I can't really comment on them because I never watched those games, man. I wasn't even born.
you know what? I'm going to say this out loud because there's not enough people watching anyway, and no one really cares. I don't think the NBA really started until like the 1980s, 1985. I don't even think.
Okay, great. We're in agreement, all right? 1985 is the start date.
Right? Do we
Okay.
like? Does it really matter? You know what I mean? Like, all right, Wilt scored 50, and I was like, yeah, but he was playing against like 6 foot guys who also
Cool.
work second.
Okay,
Jobs.
so we
Like,
got Pippen at number 1. So come on, give me some more names here. I'll give you a few.
well,
You want?
Would Kobe be a second
Yes,
because he got
yes,
3 with Shaq?
100%. So
D Wade,
would he be number 2? But he's definitely one that you would consider as a Robin for those 3 rings with Shaq. Correct?
yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Would D Wade be one?
Yes.
But
D Wade. So what? 2 rings there with
who is
LeBron.
it?
Now
Clay.
yep, Clay. Now we're talking about players like Tony Parker, Ginobili. Okay. And who was number 2? I guess with Elijah when he won 2. So here's the point. Okay. Let's say Kyrie gets 2. I don't think he even cracks the top 10 list.
Okay. We could do we haven't done a top 10 list in ages. We haven't done a top
Oh
10
no,
list in
oh
ages.
no. Top 10, number 2, Robins in the NBA. Stay tuned. Is that what you're trying to say?
If that's going to be the thing that makes us, then I'll do it. Jesus.
All right. Well, we'll talk.